So, it was one of the biggest trades heading into the 2025 trade deadline. If you are a Chicago Blackhawks fan who has been roughly keeping up with a lot of the social media discourse surrounding the team the past few months, you probably were excited to see the Seth Jones trade go down. Mostly due to this contract that he's got being so big, and then the other idea that presented itself as to whether or not Jones is a quote-unquote locker room cancer. That was a pretty prominent talking point that I still think does ruminate for a lot of Chicago Blackhawks fans. But the thing is, just 2 weeks after it was made, this trade's looking pretty one-sided, not gonna lie. Because when you take a look at Seth Jones and the way he is playing in Florida, yes, it's true that he was acquired to be a middle four defenseman to bolster up a team that is looking to repeat in the Stanley Cup Playoffs. But this is kind of how things are going right now. Let's take a look at this tweet by Scott Powers. The Florida Panthers have been outscored 6-1 with Seth Jones on the ice at 5v5 in his first 7 games. He has a 41.61 expected goals percentage. Now, if you wanted to just simplify these numbers, this is really not productive hockey. Getting outscored 6-1 and having a 41.61 expected goals percentage, 9% more chances are going the opposite team's way when Seth Jones is on the ice, and the team is straight up just getting outscored, period. Meanwhile, you're looking at the opposite side and you're saying, hey, Spencer Knight is doing really well with the Chicago Blackhawks. He is taking over as potentially an elite goaltending option down the line, and he's been fantastic, and Jones is bad, and so this trade was an automatic win for Chicago. Hold your horses, folks, because it is kind of misleading just to look at the numbers in this way. And to be fair to Scott Powers, who went out there and posted this, there was a reply thread on this tweet saying, hey, it's a little too early to start patting Kyle Davidson on the back. Stats are stats. The only question is, when the Panthers are playing for another cup, will you repost this hot take? I don't know if it was a take, Powers said. I just noticed he hadn't had a great start after 7 games. Which is legitimately what the numbers are indicating here. He hasn't been good. Seth Jones hasn't been. But there still are extra things that we need to acknowledge before we start dancing on the guy's grave and declaring Chicago as the true winners of this deal. Primarily due to the Florida Panthers and their decor situation. While it's true that Seth Jones had a pretty decent time in Chicago, I'm going to say that it's decent because he was played a lot, he got some points, but also he was in charge of manning one of the worst teams in the NHL. Obviously, the advanced numbers are not going to be too great, but when you think about what Jones was acquired to be in Chicago, he was supposed to be that number 1 guy, and for the most part, he was that. In Florida, he's not really supposed to be that important. He's supposed to play behind Aaron Ekblad, who, by the way, I don't know if you saw, he's suspended for 20 games because of PEDs, so he's out. Not to mention the fact that I'm pretty sure Dmitry Kulikov also got injured in the same game yesterday, so that's another stable, meaningful defenseman that the Panthers have on their team out. Seth Jones, if you take a look at his game log in the past a little while here, he's been getting a lot of minutes with the Florida Panthers. 25, 27, 28-minute games for Seth Jones. He's not producing any points, and the team is losing games here, but Seth Jones is right in the thick of it, primarily because he has to be. There's no other choice with the absence of Aaron Ekblad. And I don't want to make it seem like I'm defending Seth Jones, quote-unquote, which technically I am, but like, believe me, I still do think that this is not really the player that is good enough to be tasked with that level of responsibility. I think a lot of Blackhawks fans have gotten accustomed to that over the years. Hey, Seth Jones is very decent offensively, not great defensively. He doesn't really improve. He's a big guy, yes, but there are so many extra parts of his game that you just kind of wish you had more out of him, that you start to realize, hey, this might be why this guy was a former top prospect who slipped in the draft all the way back in 2012, and he was never able to handle being a number one in Nashville or in Columbus for an extended amount of time at least. There was a pretty good sample of Seth Jones hockey in the late 2010s, but it wasn't too long. And now he's the player that he is. He got used to a culture of losing in Chicago, lashed out against the team in the media, talking about how the team is full of losers. Then he gets traded to a team full of winners, and now they're starting to lose a bunch of games too. With Jones on the ice, mind you. He's been there playing and just getting results going against him. So, winner, winner, chicken dinner? I'll say this. When Aaron Ekblad comes back in the Stanley Cup Playoffs and Jones is going back to playing, let's say, 21 minutes a night, rather than being tasked with 28-minute games here and there, maybe things will stabilize themselves and maybe Seth Jones wins a Stanley Cup. If he does that, then okay, great. We're going to go out there and congratulate the guy because it's good that he can go out there and get positive results. But when you think about the Chicago Blackhawks and what they've got, what their situation is like, what they were seeing out of Seth Jones and how he progressed, ultimately this trade is a pretty big win for Chicago. Now, just because I'm a snarky Vancouver Canucks fan, I wanted to shift gears a little bit in the Chicago conversation and talk about a guy whose overall level of play in Chicago has been quite up and down this season. It's Connor Bedard. Because Connor had himself a really rough game for Chicago against the Vancouver Canucks the other night. 14 penalty minutes and a 10-minute misconduct to go with the 2 hookings that he had gotten earlier in the game. Not to mention the 10 penalty minutes that he got against San Jose the night before. Literally 2 straight games for Connor Bedard to getting called out by the referees and getting misconducts because of it. Just total uncharacteristic play out of the young superstar here. He's still 19. He's turning 20 in July. But Connor Bedard being in the spot that he's at right now, where he's producing decently, he's got 52 points in 67 games played, on pace for 64 points this season, so technically less than what he had gotten last season. But Connor Bedard has been in a pretty tough spot considering just the level of frustration that he has been displaying on the ice. We get that he is a super competitive guy. He's been one of the hottest, most productive players at every level that he's played at, and he's used to going out there and winning. So to see him go through this stint in Chicago where the frustration is boiling, the team is going to get another top pick, and they traded away their most expensive contract in Seth Jones, and Connor Bedard is at the forefront of that, getting thrown out of games because he's yelling at the referees. We're seeing a lot of folks on the Canucks side of things making memes and making jokes. Are they jokes or are they not? As to whether or not Connor Bedard would eventually one day pull off a Quinn Hughes and decide to leave Chicago to come over to Vancouver. Yeah, I say that kind of facetiously because as a Canucks fan, selfishly, I would love to see Quinn Hughes stay in Vancouver and not go to join his brothers in New Jersey. But could Connor Bedard do some sort of a similar thing here? I get that it's kind of not traditional for hockey players to do that sort of thing, leave their teams and then go to their hometown in free agency. Like, the fact that it happened to John Tavares was like the biggest thing when it happened, but it was a big thing because it almost never happens. And the fact that Toronto wasn't really able to get any of the other superstars that they were supposed to get. They didn't get Stamkos, they didn't get Doughty, they didn't get any of the other guys that were from Ontario, but they got John Tavares. That was the first time that sort of thing happened in a long time in the National Hockey League, and a lot of Canucks fans over the past few days have been asking whether or not Connor Bedard could do the same thing. Obviously, it's a selfish thing to go out there and ask, oh, could Connor Bedard come over and play with Vancouver? But when you think about the guy's love for this team, he was going out there saying that his favorite player was Tyler Mott. You know who else loves Tyler Mott? Vancouver Canucks fans. Maybe Wings fans, and Tampa Bay fans, and Rangers fans at this time, but still, in that time frame, it was only Vancouver fans going out there and expressing love and adoration to Tyler Mott, and Connor Bedard was one of them. I'm not intentionally going out there and sending a subliminal message to one of our stream moderators in Connor Bedard, trying to will him to use that ELC to his advantage, sign a short-term deal with Chicago, and then find himself getting moved to Vancouver, but hey, it'd be cool. It's very rare and near impossible for young guys on their entry-level contracts to request trades, but if Connor Bedard wanted to come to Vancouver at some point in his career, I think a lot of Canucks fans would be running up and down the streets like crazy. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below about these two Chicago Blackhawks stories, how the Seth Jones trade is looking great for the Hawks, and how Connor Bedard, he's getting pretty frustrated as of late, man. You gotta surround this guy with a winning team eventually. But for now, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed this British Ashroll sign on, and bye.